Carried all the weight on my shoulder. Had me going ever once I told you no. Told you no. Kept going like a marching soldier. Play my part, boy, I had to hold you down. Hold it down. When the tidal waves come around and wipe off what we built, would you fight for love or would you back down and let our hope drown? When the world is everything to break us up for good, would you hang around? We know we got right now. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah.
Cuando esas caricias tocaban toda tu piel. Tell me how you feel about us. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, soñé que me querías, pero no es cierto. Solo lo haces pa' que yo esté contento. La chispa de la llama se apagó lento. Cambiamos mentiras por juramentos. Sabía todo de ella, pero ahora ya no lo sé. Siempre has estado tan bella, pero has cambiado, mujer.
When the tidal waves come around and wipe off what we built, would you fight for love or would you back down and let our hope drown?
Siendo que ya no te tengo, o al menos yo no tu amor. No, no, no.
Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah.
Cuando esas caricias tocaban toda tu piel. Tell me how you feel about us. Tell me how you feel about us.
Through the night and day, I keep on falling for you. I keep on falling for you. Through the night and day, I keep on falling for you. I keep on falling. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah. Tell me how you feel about us. Yeah, yeah.
Cuando esas caricias tocaban toda tu piel. Tell me how you feel about us. Tell me how you feel about us.
So while these are still drying, I thought I'm going to do 3 tests on these papers, and I'm going to start with the lifting. So lifting simply means how well watercolor lift. I'm going to use a different brush because this brush would not be great for lifting. It's got soft bristles in there. So I don't want to damage any of my pointy brushes. I'm going to go with a flat brush and just sort of see how well the color comes off. You basically, all you do is wet the brush, go across a color. I think I'm going to go across the orange and the green. And then I'm going to just lift it with a piece of paper. So I'll start with, where shall I start? Let me start with this one, Winsor Newton. So my brush is sort of wet. You don't want too much water on there. And basically all you're going to do is just, or all I'm going to do is try to wet it and then just lift it, and that lifted very, very well. Now, it could be that it's a non-staining color, so I'd go for the other vibrant color or intense color in this bunch, and that would be the Prussian Green, I think it was, wasn't it? Yes, Prussian Green. So let's go ahead and do the same with the Prussian Green. So that lifted fairly well as well. So that was Winsor Newton, the hot pressed paper. Let's do Winsor Newton cold pressed. So that doesn't lift as well on the cold pressed. But the Prussian Green lifted quite well. Okay, now let's do arches. Doesn't lift very well at all. so the arches does not lift very well. And then let's see with this one here, Artistico Fabriano, which is the 100% cotton. Doesn't lift. So this one, I'd almost say it's worse than the arches so far in terms of lifting. Let's try the Jacksons now. So we've got Jackson's cold pressed. Okay, so you can see that's lifting very well. And same here. So this one as well. And that's the rough paper. Oh, made a mess here. Okay, so let's try the Prussian Green. Actually, the Prussian Green is still a little bit wet, so I'm going to leave that for now. Let's do the rough. So the rough, that lifted brilliantly. Almost back to the white. And same thing with the Prussian Green. Okay, so we've done everything except for the Prussian Green. I'll come back to that a little bit later. In fact, let me just give it a little blast with a dryer. So we finish this test and then we move on to the other two tests. Okay, so this corner is completely dry and the other one is still wet. So I'm just going to do it on the dry corner right here. And I'm expecting the same result as with the orange, which it does lift very well. Okay, so let's move on to the dispersed test. Now with the dispersed test, I just will wet an area of the paper, like so. And into that area, I will drop a color, and I think I'll go with the beautiful cobalt blue, what was it, Violet by Daniel Smith. So this color here. I'm just going to wet it up a little. So I'm just touching it in the middle and looking at the disperse, how well it sort of moves. So next thing we're going to, I'm actually going to switch to another brush for wetting the pages or the paper. Running out of space here. So let's do Winsor Newton next. So we've got a bit of the wetting of the paper. And then make sure there is no puddle, so wait a few seconds for the water to be absorbed into the paper. That will be really interesting on arches because I don't know if you noticed, arches has been a struggle, the rough paper. It just takes everything from the brush. This is a brush that holds a lot of water in there and literally it just kind of takes it all in and you end up with a lot of dry brush marks. So that's quite intense for a dispersed test. Okay, next one we've got Jackson's. I'm going to wet a couple of them at a time so we don't need to wait that long. Okay, that's pretty good as well. This is still quite wet. Okay, so this one I can already go in. The Jackson's keeping the water quite long. So you can see this one is not doing what the others did, immediate disperse, so it's a bit slow. And with the arches, before I need to re-wet it, I'm going to go into it. It's got a good disperse. Alright, that was quite surprising, but good. Okay, now just about time to do the dispersed test here. Okay, well, I'd say that this one was the slowest, Winsor Newton. And the Artistico Fabriano, that also wasn't too great. That was the first one we did. The rest of them did quite well. The arches was slow, but it did move quite nicely. The rest of them were really quick. So the Winsor Newton hot press was quick, the Jackson's rough, the other one, and this was also fairly quick, Jackson's cold press. Okay, so now what I want to do is a bit of blossoming, which basically you take a color. I'm thinking of what color to use here. Okay, I think for the blossoming I will use the Shadow Violet, because it's just it's a nice color when it starts blossoming, and I'll show you why. So I'll just do those quickly. I'll show you one, and then the rest I will just speed up the process of them. So let me start with this paper here. So this is the Jackson's Rough. So for blossoming, all I'm going to do is just wet my brush and just do like a normal sort of swatch. Like that. And once you finish, I would wash off my brush, make sure it's not too wet, start where the corner is sort of here on the edge, and just kind of go back a little bit. So see what happens there when it dries. And I'm going to repeat the same thing across all of them. Okay, so all of them are dry. One of them I had to kind of blot dry with a tissue because it was taking forever. That's why it's looking a bit like that, but we'll look at that in a minute. Let's start with the Jackson's paper. So in terms of color vibrancy, you can see they're beautifully vibrant, and lifting was really well across all of them, and the color dispersion was very good. In terms of blossoming, I got a bit of blossoming here, but nothing on the rough, which is the kind of, you know, has this shape, that dark green paper pad or paper block. Otherwise, comparing these two rough papers side by side from Jackson's, they're fairly comparable. You can see the texture of the paper is helping the granulation to look a certain way. So in terms of the granulation, you can see that the texture of the paper of these both are rough. Obviously you get a different texture here within the granulating colors. So that's something you might want to consider, because it's got these sort of rectangular shapes. It sort of sits in there, and yeah, it could be a thing. Like if you're into that, that could be something for you. Otherwise, the cold pressed, they're all doing well. What I liked is the colors were bright. I did notice that they took slightly longer to dry than the 100% cotton papers, which might have something to do with the sizing of the paper. Okay, now let's bring in the, I'll do the really expensive one, which is this one here. So the Winsor Newton hot press paper, and well, the others are also quite expensive, but let's just kind of do one by one. So let's start with the Winsor Newton hot press, which is my least favorite out of them, and hopefully you can see why. So the colors come out brighter, in my opinion, than here, but you get a really lovely blossoming effect on this paper. So if I bring it a bit closer, you can see those sort of the veining of it. That's what I was hoping on these papers. Here I didn't get it at all. Here I got a little bit of it. This was the strongest out of them all, I noticed. Otherwise, the colors seem different. Like this Prussian green seems very different to the Prussian green here. It almost has a different tint. And if you can see the other papers, the Prussian green has the same color, but on this it comes out completely different. So I find that that's what happens with my Winsor Newton hot press paper. Sometimes the color that I know so well and I love, it just looks different on this paper, and it happens to a number of colors. So that's Winsor Newton hot press against the Jacksons. Let's look at Winsor Newton cold press, which used to be my all-time favorite paper. So let's just put it here. And actually side by side, the hot press and the cold press. Hopefully you can see that the cold press looks more vibrant. The dispersion was bigger on the hot press versus the cold press. But you do get this blossoming here, also quite strong. What else? Granulation is fairly comparable. So you can see that. And pigment separation all kind of looks very similar. So that's I guess why I used to really like this paper. Then let's look at arches. Now arches was quite interesting. Altogether it felt very, very different. Colors are vibrant. That's always been the case with arches. They're super, super vibrant. They come out beautifully. The granulation is beautiful. Pigment separation, not so much. I find that the pigment separation in the Jacksons and across the other papers was a bit stronger than here. In fact, so these two colors don't have that. If I just put them next to each other, you can see that. Or maybe I'll bring it closer to you. It wasn't as evident. So let's compare both roughs, the Jackson's rough and the Arches rough again. So granulation looks nice. Possibly slightly less than on the other papers. The lifting was not great. So both of the Winsor Newtons, just to come for the lifting test, were fantastic. And the Arches was in line with the Fabriano Artistico. So not very strong at all. And blossoming, I didn't get much here. And what else? Yeah, the other thing was it takes up so much of the liquid from the brush. I mean, this is quite a thirsty brush. It holds a lot of water, but as soon as I would load it with the pigment, with the water, and it's nice and juicy, and do just one movement, it kind of already created dry brushing, so I had to go back in. So you would go through a lot of watercolor with this paper, and if you're a beginner, I would not recommend this one. It takes a lot of kind of adjustment. It's not my favorite as well, so I think leave it to the pros, this paper. And then finally Artistico Fabriano. Let's put it next to these, and kind of, to me, I don't know about you, but to me the Jacksons look more vibrant than on the Fabriano. And there was good movement of the watercolor, so the dispersion was good. Light blossoming, there isn't much of the veining happening. I found that these two Jacksons were stronger on the veining. Granulation was okay, but not as strong. I mean, if you look at the shadow violet and the cobalt blue violet, there is just... So this is the cold press. Let me compare it to the Jackson's cold press. Hopefully you can see that there is more interest on the Jackson's paper there, and these two look similar to the other papers. So yeah, again, a really expensive paper. So if we're looking at things like vibrancy of the color and price for the paper, I think Jackson's did very well here, and that's probably my conclusion for the whole thing. Let me know what you think, and not always is the more expensive paper better for what you are doing. So just think about the key points of your needs in paper and what you like. But like I said, in terms of vibrancy, I really like this paper, and the price tag is great as well. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.